Welcome back, you beautiful people, to another edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I'm here with my much better looking, at least follically speaking, partner, Greg Thompson. How you doing, dude?
Good guy. I will say, yeah, you are a beautiful man. I will take the top end, but the rest of you is perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, you get to see too much of me, probably. I know my wife probably thinks I see too much of you. So, well, let's jump right into it a little bit today. But before we get too far in, obviously, I want to let everybody know who's watching it here live on YouTube for the first time. We are part of cover1.net. You can find us everywhere online as Cover One on any of your social media platforms. Cover One, if you don't know, is really just about breaking down the film, getting into the film and the analytics. We had a really good argument in our Slack channel today about, there's stat guys, there's film guys, and kind of merging those two worlds and saying, finding the whys of things. And Eric, who is the kind of OG behind this whole thing, is maybe, in my opinion, one of the best. That's why I got involved, because he really finds these things. So you can find a lot of our stuff up at cover1.net. And like I was talking about the premium Slack channel, we do have a premium membership. It's $10 right now for the full year. And Greg, I try to be super active, but I think you might be the most active in the Slack channel. So why don't you give the rundown? I feel like you're the expert here.
No, yeah, sometimes sadly, but yeah, it's just our own little community. It's our own little group of informed, I like to think, intelligent Bills fans. There's always a race to bring in new information. I think there's people scouring every possible media source, Twitter and Reddit and Instagram and Facebook, and anytime any information comes up, it's hysterical. Everyone races back to the Cover One Slack to see who's there. So we find out about everything as quickly as possible, and then you have all the guys jump in, give their take, go into kind of why that fits, why it doesn't fit. Oh man, that's not what I was hoping. We kind of experience those things in real time, and it turns into a good cauldron for discussion that we're able to kind of, throw things out there, see what can stand up to criticism and debate and discussion. Today, like you said, was a great example. Had a very lively debate and discussion about kind of, well, I think that's a little bit too far. Well, yeah, I get what you're saying there, but we might need to, I think that's maybe too strong. And I think it really helps everyone get a better understanding of what's going on, kind of measure where their preferences and ideas stand on things. And we're able to do it in a constructive forum where sadly we know how often things go down the rabbit hole on social media where things get personal or offensive or, just nasty with each other. And our group really stays positive and reasonable and respectful the entire time. And it's a great feeling to have a forum like that where you can talk and throw things out there and enjoy each other and really build friendships out of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on the friendship side. And one of my favorite things about sports has always been that the arguing and debating side of it, because there really is no quantitative right or wrong when it comes to sports with all the variables and all the different things. No one's ever been fully right all the time about sports. And so that's fun. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. So it's the one thing that I debate with people that at the end of the day doesn't mean a whole lot to my everyday life. I'm still going to wake up and do the same crap that I do every day. But it's Twitter and social media, while they're great tools to have and they are fun to engage on, and we'll tell you our handles later and you can find us there. They do get heated. They do get kind of one-upsmanship, where the Slack channel for me is more about honing my own abilities, testing my own theories. When I put it out there, you guys are going to be quick to call me on it. If it's, if I'm way out in left field, I'm going to know right away, but in a respectful manner where it's not, well, now I'm going to block this guy because I'm sick of his stuff and I don't want anything to do with him and I'm leaving this room. I'm taking my ball and going home, where social media gets like that. So it's a fun spot. We could go on about the Slack channel for a long time, but make sure you head over cover1.net, check out the premium subscriptions. You can find us there, and it's $10 for the whole year. It's a great deal, and you get all the premium content too, and we'll cover through all that here at the end. Real quick, before we start talking Bills, obviously the chat's going real live here. If you're watching along on YouTube, if you're on the podcast, you don't get to see the chat, but a lot of people coming in with the rest in peace, Pancho Billa. Obviously, the news yesterday broke. Pancho Billa lost his battle with cancer. Obviously, all of Bill's Mafia is sending their condolences. And I know Greg will probably touch on a little bit. Del Reed and Jonah Javid, is that Javid, are working on something and Greg will fill you on the details there. The only thing I want to say, and I did put out on Twitter, I am not somebody that met Pancho in real life. I worked with him a little bit on the internet on a graphic that he needed. He reached out to me. And a lot of people reach out to me. If you know how to use Photoshop, people just say, hey, can you make this thing for me? You know, and he did it in a really cool way. And I was like, dude, this was a couple of years ago now, 3 years ago. I was like, dude, you're so cool. Like Pancho Villa is such a cool thing. I'll absolutely do this for you. And he was just so courteous and kind and was like, are you sure, dude? Like, I'll pay you money. I was like, no, you know, don't worry about it. And the whole experience, even just over the internet, the positivity, the appreciation that he had for me doing this, he would reach back out later. He was having stickers made for a charity he was doing for kids at a local school. And he was sending me pictures of the kids with the stickers and him. And he was just reaching out to say, hey, man, I really appreciate what you did. This is where it went. And we just kind of, from then, kind of just talked. And he always had this just, even over the internet, infectious positivity and energy that I was honestly jealous of, because I don't have that energy. My energy can be a lot more negative. And when I find those people, and Dell is another example of when I find those people, those are people that I actually aspire to try to be more like. And when I find myself in those moments, I do think of how they are and how they do things and carry themselves. And I try to be better like that. So I know Pancho isn't watching the podcast right now, but people, he made an impact on people, and it was a real tangible impact. So he did that for me, and I'm super appreciative of that and the moments that I got to know him. And I'm sure other people have stories. And I know you got to actually meet him in real life.
Yeah. Just, I mean, he obviously took a pretty great deal of effort to go to a fair amount of games out there. So I did get to see him very superficially, you know, in tailgating in several games, 1 or 2 games in Buffalo, the game in Atlanta 2 years ago, got to spend a decent amount of time with him. And he was friends with a friend of mine, Tony, who probably is watching or listening to the show here. And he's everything that he appears to be on the videos, on the interviews, the things you hear. He is constantly smiling, constantly positive, constantly just a good energy kind of person at all times. And to be able to do that, and now in hindsight, that people didn't realize he had been going through this battle for years now, and that most of his notoriety had come in the past 2 to 3 years here, that the vast majority of that, he was fighting cancer that entire time. And to maintain that energy and that outlook and that kind of positivity in the face of very literally a life-threatening illness for a 39-year-old man about the same age that I am, with 2 kids the same that I am, is just unbelievable to think about someone going through that and putting themselves to the side while dealing with that, not to let that bring down other people. And it's just that, like you said, the kind of thing that I think everyone should aspire to be. There is a lot of great things going on there. I have seen one verified GoFundMe that is associated directly with the family, and the money is 100% going to his longtime girlfriend and the mother of his 2 children and his 2 children. Especially, I'm sure, with some of the medical bills and things like that may still be out there. There is a 26 shirts, which you can look at Aaron's handsome body there, that the Pancho Power shirts are back up on 26shirts.com, which a great deal of that, at least $8. I'm not sure if Dell's doing beyond that, but a great deal of that money is going directly back to the family. And then the third one that Aaron referenced earlier is something that Jonah Javed, who used to be a anchor in Buffalo on the TV news and sports director, moved down to Dallas and then built a relationship down there further with Ezra Castro and his family to go through that and to be able to set some things up. Was able to get, for anyone who looked on social media, some touching last words on a few things directly from Ezra. And one of his final wishes was that in lieu of flowers or any of the niceties that people often do in situations like this, he asked that any money would go directly to children in need who don't have school supplies, to create backpacks to send. So what Dell and Jonah have done is worked with a group called the teachersdesk.org. I placed the link in the chat. The teachersdesk.org is a group that helps create backpacks filled with $100 in school supplies to give to needy children. So every $10 donated there will go towards that. Every 10 donations will create a new backpack. And that was directly from Ezra, as in one of his final wishes, is that instead of, some of the other nice things that people often do that may not be as sustainable, you can go through there. The link that we'll also post from Del Reed has a thread that goes through some detail. It actually has an awesome picture of the core school supplies: pencils, pens, rulers, glue sticks, erasers, personal hygiene items, different other fun things, some coloring books and crayons and things like that for the kids, and some kids that, you know, may not have some of those things you take for granted. So again, I can't think of a more perfect example of, in his final moments, literally filming a video knowing that, asking them, hey, I only think I have about a week left here. Don't show this until after I pass. Having the peace of mind to think of that, and in those final moments be thinking about how many other children can I help do this. I mean, that's the kind of thing I can only wish I can ever have the class and the grace and the elegance to go through life that way, and to fight through my final moments thinking of others. It just really speaks to what an incredible man he was, and how he was able to put himself behind so many others and always thinking of others. So those are 3 different avenues that you can take. Again, there's a direct GoFundMe. There is the 26 shirts, Pancho Power shirts, and the Teacher's Desk Foundation that's going to be able to help direct any of that energy or generosity. We realize everyone's not in a financial position to be able to do those things, but anyone who is, we'll make sure to send out those links on the thread for the show tonight, as well as from our social media posts.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure other people will come up with other ways to honor him in different ways, and there'll be plenty of opportunities. I'm sure the team's going to work on some really cool things that they're going to do throughout the season. He's obviously a major part of the Bills organization, and they've made it a point over the last couple of years to make him a part of the organization as kind of almost an ambassador to the Bills Mafia. They've really leaned on that. So I don't see them. I mean, that's a classy organization. They show they care. So I definitely see them doing something here in the near future. And really, ultimately, when I was thinking about this before we were going live, knowing we would at least address it, for me, the big thing on a full scale view, and I don't know how you feel, is it really shows me how sports, we're just talking about, sports doesn't matter and it's a fun thing to argue about, but it has the ability to really bring people together. And a lot of the time sports brings out the best in people. And we've seen it over and over again, whether it's players doing things. Bills fans have done this type of stuff in the communities before. The Andy Dalton, giving him a ton of money. Sports just brings out this inner joy in people. As much as we argue on Twitter about it, at the end of the day, it can do very powerful things. And it had a powerful impact on Ezra's life. And he used the 15 minutes or more of fame he was able to get through being a sports fan and really turn that into some positivity and good things. And that's just a great story. And I love that stuff, man.
Absolutely. It's the best part of what we do. Like you said, we have enough serious things going on in life that sports is how we kind of get away from that. And sometimes moments like this kind of bring you crashing back to earth. But it's something that that we're proud to have had a very small piece in, and to see others do good things with.
Absolutely. So let's get back into the sports side of things here, because there's some stuff to talk about. It's not a lot. This time of year we get a little less and less, right? We're ramping down from the draft, rookie mini camps, nothing really going on there. So we got a few tidbits to talk about. We'll start with what we left off with, actually. So last week we're going live. We're talking about Tyree Jackson with our boy Nate Geary, trying to figure out who he is and where he belongs on this team. You interrupt me, which I'm still mad about now. You interrupt me to just let me know that while we're in the middle of this conversation, Derek Anderson goes and retires on us and totally screws up the 3 to 4 minute conversation we had just had about where Tyree Jackson fits on this team. We hadn't really gotten to digest it. That's something that's hard to do live. If anybody's ever been live and news breaks, it's pretty hard to. Yeah, it's happened to me a few times now, and you just don't have the full scale to really think about things and give your opinion on it. So you just kind of talk off the cuff, and that's not always fun for a guy like me who's not professionally trained. So we've had a week now here to think about how this impacts the roster, how this impacts Tyree Jackson. And there's a couple other things that we'll get to too. The Bills are going to have some really interesting decisions here in how they carry this roster going forward. Do you think that Derek Anderson locks Tyree Jackson into a QB3? Do you think that they carry a QB3? Do you think what are your thoughts here on this QB3 thing? Because I know me and you were both considering Derek Anderson's a lock. They're carrying 3 QBs. I don't know if I still feel that way.
Yeah. So the words that you use are important. I think that Tyree Jackson right now, without them going out to sign any other veteran, and I don't expect them to go out after a Josh McCown type who is out there, that kind of guy who would be a pretty direct replacement for Derek Anderson. They seem pretty firm that having an experienced quarterback coach like Ken Dorsey in the room is the equivalent they needed for what Derek Anderson was doing. And probably an admission that David Culley was not the right choice in hindsight as a first-time quarterback coach. So I don't expect them to do a move like that. I do expect them to bring in a fourth camp arm kind of guy, a undrafted free agent, even below Tyree Jackson. So as of right now, short of them actually going out and signing a Josh McCown type, I expect the quarterback ranking in the quarterback room to be Josh Allen, Matt Barkley, Tyree Jackson, quarterback other guy X. Now, that I also expect to carry through the season without the fourth guy being around. However, I don't think that Tyree Jackson necessarily needs to be or would be the best use of a third guy on the active roster, 53-man roster. I don't think he has so much upside that we can't possibly expose him to waivers to risk getting him onto the practice squad, short of a exponential growth curve in the next 2 months that we just can't possibly risk that. So I would be much happier to have him as our third quarterback, but on the practice squad, still in the quarterback room, still learning along with Matt Barkley, still listening to Ken Dorsey. And if, God forbid, there's an injury to Josh or to Matt Barkley, well, then you call him up and activate him for that game in that week. But I don't think that he has so much upside that we can't possibly expose him to waivers and try to get him onto the practice squad. And I'm willing to retract that if we see just a huge leap forward in these preseason games and that his time with Jordan Palmer has just changed all his really ugly mechanics. So I do expect him to be QB3, but I expect him to be QB3 from the practice squad.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing changes about where on the depth chart he sits. I agree also that practice squad is the ideal spot for him. And I think that the Derek Anderson retiring in some ways favors the Bills because they're going to have some tough choices to make when it comes to the final wide receiver spot, whether or not they keep 3 or 4 tight ends, how many DBs they keep. And I know it sounds silly, but one roster spot opening up is actually a pretty big deal right now for this team, which is a great opportunity.
That's a fourth tight end. That's a 7th wide receiver. That's a 4th running back. That matters.
It does matter big time. And I think that they would rather keep that spot than give it to Tyree Jackson. Now, it's going to get interesting this summer because there's a ton of variables. And we had this kind of back and forth with somebody on Twitter a while back about, pre-Derek Anderson, what it would take for Tyree to get on this roster. And it's going to be variable play. Injuries to other teams' quarterback rooms, that could be in play for Tyree Jackson to maybe not be exposed to waivers. If a few teams get guys that go down, developmental guys even, then maybe the Bills have to really consider how much they like him to expose him. I think that becomes maybe a possible consideration. Just totally balling out this summer. Yeah, sure. He plays to the spot where you feel nervous about putting him on the wires, but all these guys, and this goes for Sills too. I know There's a lot of hype about Sills. All these guys didn't get drafted. And I know that every year an undrafted free agent or two across the league come in and have an impact on the team. We saw it last year with 2 guys, which is a huge anomaly, I think. But that doesn't mean that it's a path to success for the team. Teams all passed on these guys for their flaws. And I think that they would still continue to probably pass on them when it comes time to cut down to the 53. Because as nice as it is for the Bills right now, to be in this position where we're probably going to cut some good players come getting down to the 53, and some good players aren't going to make it and have to get stashed on the practice squad. There are a lot of other teams that are already in that spot with their roster where they've been doing this for years and cutting good players. Like the Bills just haven't been up with the rest of the league, where we're not used to our players getting taken to other teams and things like that. So I think that other teams probably aren't going to be scraping the pile for all the Bills guys. There's going to be a few good players that get rejected or go, but I think there's going to be a good chance to bring Sills back, to bring Tyree Jackson back. And if you don't, I also don't think it's the end of the world if they miss out on these guys and aren't able to bring them back on the practice squad. But I really think for Tyree Jackson, at least a year on the practice squad is the best possible scenario for him, even if it's not with the Bills. This guy is not ready to be on a 53-man roster. And I think it would be unfair to somebody who could actually probably play in the NFL in 2019 if he was on the roster.
Yeah, I think fans vastly overestimate long-term potential. And let's use an example of a really boring back-end 52nd, 53rd guy. Julian Stanford's special teams ability and ability to back up Tremaine Edmonds is incredibly more valuable in 2019 than an extra David Sills or an extra Tyree Jackson. Like that tangibly matters to the game day roster and our actual depth and our special teams talent. And no, he doesn't have the long-term potential of the 5 or 10% chance that maybe one of those guys hits their ceiling. Sure, that's intoxicating and sounds fun, but the likelihood of contributing this year is incredibly much higher for a guy like a Julian Stanford or a Maurice Alexander or a Dean Marlowe or a Wyatt Teller, possibly as a 9th offensive lineman, or as a Tommy Sweeney as a 7th or as a 4th tight end. I'd much rather have one of those guys that I think can contribute, play 20, 30, 40% of the special team snaps, jump in there for a little bit in their role on offense, and also have the upside to develop into something as well, versus just a shot in the dark. And I know you brought up last year, I think every fan is intoxicated by the idea of, well, we have to find our next Robert Foster or our next Levi Wallace. Well, that's not that common. That doesn't happen all the time. And the reason they even got a chance to do that is because our roster was so bad last year that it was possible for 2 undrafted free agents to make the team. So,
and Foster got cut. Let's not forget. He got cut and then was brought back because he wasn't figuring it out. And yes, he had a good portion of the season when he got brought back and really put up good numbers. I'm still not sold on Robert Foster being able to continue that. I want to see that for a whole season with people having tape on him. So I'm not pointing at Levi Wallace and Robert Foster and saying that's the mold to get success in this league, because it's definitely not. It's an anomaly and they really haven't arrived yet.
Yeah. And, again, I like you and I both talked about it. I think we have David Sills right there as that 54th, 55th guy right on the edge. And if he has a great camp, he could edge out a guy. I think that you might have even projected him to make the roster. I had him as my first practice squad guy, and that Duke Williams, I thought his physicality would translate to be able to play special teams earlier on while Sills is building that up. I don't expect Tyree Jackson to make it, but it's possible. If he plays well, he could hang on there as that 52nd, 53rd guy versus being the practice squad 3rd quarterback. But, once you get your core team together, and we'll go through this in much greater detail in every single position group as we lead up to training camp, there's a set amount that you have to have so many running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, linemen, D, linebackers, secondary. And then you have, do we take a 5th safety? Do you have a 6th linebacker? Do you have a 6th or 7th receiver, a 4th or a 5th running back? Do you keep a fullback? Do you have a 4th tight end? We can probably rattle off 7 or 8 of those luxury positions, and we get to pick 3 or 4 of those 7 or 8. And having a spot like that 3rd quarterback spot take up one of those, that's the difference of a David Sills or a Duke Williams, a Jason Kroom or a Tommy Sweeney, a Wyatt Teller, a Dean Marlowe or Saran Neal, a Kevin Johnson as a 5th corner. Those are the kind of guys that get cut if you keep a Tyree Jackson that's there. So I think it's critical to save every one of those. I know Eric's had to talk me up the ledge several times. I keep getting excited every time we sign a tight end because I think it means we can cut Patrick DeMarco and not need a fullback. But I'm pretty sure no matter what, Patrick DeMarco is going to be on this team in 2019. But, those are the kind of decisions that are going to come up. And it's exciting to have, I think, I've said this on a couple of shows, cut down day in Bills Mafia Twitter is going to be an ugly day because there's going to be an awful lot of people furious that their guy got cut. And I can't wait for it.
Absolutely. So let's get into a specific position right now. And obviously throughout this offseason, we'll really have full episodes about these positions. But Bill signed Lee Smith. I know you had put out the tweet, no, we don't want Lee Smith. Don't ask me about it.
Yeah.
But I think that you've come around on it, especially right after they signed him. We were on Slack channel talking about it and said, wow, this is probably not good for Jake Fisher. About 30 minutes later, Jake Fisher's gone anyway.
Yeah.
Too. So I think that also made me feel a little bit better about it, that we weren't carrying all these guys going into camp. But it's an interesting grab in a lot of ways. He's not going to be a guy that comes in and produces in the passing game. He has enough production or lack of production in his NFL career. He's not going to totally become a different player, but he's very productive as a blocker. And it was something that the Bills struggled with last year. So they're setting this priority. And we saw it last year with gaining Star. However people feel about Star Latulippe, they struggled in the run game. They struggled with big bodies in the middle, and they went out and addressed that. They see their struggles, and this is a great thing to be able to self-scout and know where your weaknesses are. They saw the struggles in the blocking aspect of the tight end game, and they went out and addressed it as soon as they were able to. So I have no problem with this, but it does create a little bit of a logjam, even though Fisher's out of the picture. He was a project. I'm not sure that he was ever a guy they really intended on. They just kind of get him in that door and see if he can develop. But now they got a guy that is a proven tight end, blocking tight end. But they signed Croft. Croft is obviously tight end one. I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in 2019, 100%. You can debate long term. Does Dawson Knox have that potential? But in 2019, Tyler Croft is our
tight end
primary, 60-70% snap guy.
Yes, Lee Smith is tight end two. That contract that Lee Smith got is tight end two contract. So that leaves Dawson Knox as the developmental guy. We knew a rookie, no matter if it was Irv Smith or one of the guys we loved, isn't going to come in 2019 and make the biggest impact in the world. It was still going to be Tyler Croft 2019, no matter what rookie. So Dawson Knox is there at 3. I think that we're confident it's going to be those 3 are locks to make the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the contract.
No
so Tyler Croft, there's no way out of that contract. I was a little surprised, but 3 years for $9 million and guaranteed money into 2020 is a roster lock for Lee Smith. Dawson Knox is a 3rd-round pick. That's a roster lock. So we have those 3 tight ends for sure. Then it comes down to, which you were leading towards.
What do we do?
Yeah, do you have a 4th tight end? So I'm going to give credit. I thought that Joe Marino had a really good analogy for it in the in his Locked On pod, that our hope was that Jake Fisher's project, your best case scenario was maybe he would turn into a Lee Smith type of tight end. And then all of a sudden, Lee Smith literally became available. So why go through the project when you can go out and sign the real thing? So I wasn't ecstatic about that, because I probably would have preferred a cheaper route. But, I think arguably, and I know Eric put out some great film that showed just how dominant he can be. And I know, again, we give PFF grades a hard time, but Lee Smith grades out phenomenally in those kind of settings. He is really good at what he does. And, to set things in people's mindset, for the Raiders last year, he played in about 22% of their snaps offensively. So he wasn't out there all the time, but when you want to run a jumbo set and you could put a guy like him out there that still can technically be a threat as an eligible receiver, but can play basically like an extra offensive lineman, that is a really valuable tool. And his footwork, his technique as a blocker is really unparalleled, in that he's arguably the best blocking tight end in the league. Having a weapon like that is exactly what a Sean McDermott wants. He's also a great veteran in the room. Anyone who saw his interview on One Bills Live, with the team there, he's exactly the kind of guy that you want. They're talking about, I'm not here to take away anybody else's shine. I'm not here to take away anyone else's opportunity. And anyone that's in that room, I'm going to pour every bit of knowledge and expertise that I can into those guys and help build them up and make them better and do everything I can to be the leader that they've brought me in here to be. And that melts Sean McDermott's mind when he hears people say things like that. That's the exact kind of guy he wants in that room, with Tyler Croft, who's still 24, turning 25, Dawson Knox, who is an underclassman Tyre, is a very young tight end. If Jason Kroom comes back, a very young tight end, having those kind of guys around, that's the kind of leader that you want there. So it's not a sexy signing. It's not exciting in a, wide open, high flying offense, but it's the kind of thing that makes sense. When you get into that next step, that's, again, that Tyree Jackson roster spot. If we keep a 4th tight end, It's now going to come down to the athleticism and the wide receiver skills of Jason Kroom, being a terrible blocker and some rough ball handling skills and fumbling, versus a guy who was a 7th-round pick in Tommy Sweeney, who has phenomenal hands and is a very engaged blocker, but a pretty poor athlete, and was a 7th-round pick for a reason. So it's going to be interesting who might make it out of those last two, if we keep a 4th tight end at all.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on, because obviously we know the lock. So I'm not really worried about where they develop over training camp. Obviously, I want to see Dawson Knox develop. I'm not saying that, but I'm not interested. Nobody's going to move too much in that top 3. But what I'm really interested to see is how Kroom and Sweeney push each other, not only each other, but push to gain a spot. They're both kind of competing against each other, but they're also competing to say, hey, you really need to keep 4 tight ends on this roster. And maybe this is a scenario where I think this is pretty plausible. While they took Sweeney in the 7th round, there's a good chance that they might be able to sneak a guy like that into the practice squad. That 7th round's pretty close to undrafted anyway. I know a lot of draft Twitter likes Tommy Sweeney. There is still a disconnect between draft Twitter and the NFL a lot of times, and where the talent lies. So I think they might be able to swing him in. I think that Kroom has to come out and prove a lot, but I think a lot of people think Kroom's just dead with the Tommy Sweeney pickup. But I don't know that he's a dead man walking. Yeah, I think that they're very much giving him a chance to prove it and earn a possible spot on this roster. And I know he had the fumbles last year, but he's still a very interesting project, converted wide receiver. He doesn't have the traditional tight end frame, but he could move really well. He and Josh Allen had some good rapport at times. He got open. I think that he provides something that maybe the other 3 don't currently right now. We don't know what Dawson Knox, he obviously tests off the charts, but we haven't seen the production. Yeah. So I'm interested to see.
Yeah, I expect very little from Dawson Knox in 2019. I even expect, honestly, maybe a handful of inactive games. Eric really warned us in the premium Slack that this guy is going from literally elementary school offense to a graduate level offense, especially at the tight end position. At Ole Miss, he was asked to run 2 routes and he got 15 catches. Brian Daboll runs about the most complex tight end system in the NFL, which is obviously coming over from New England. You are taking a quantum leap in the amount of information you need to process. I think his athletic profile is intoxicating and awesome long-term. I expect that to show for us in 2021 with some glimmers next year in 2020. I think if I had to put numbers on it right now, I'd put it at about 40% each, on about a 40% chance Jason Kroom makes the roster, about a 40% chance Tommy Sweeney makes the roster, and a 20% chance that they only keep 3 tight ends and neither of them do. And that, with the other 60% for Tommy Sweeney, if he doesn't make it, I think he has a decent chance to get onto the practice squad. The same idea as Darryl Johnson, the defensive end. When you get into those late round picks, there's a chance we could sneak him on there. So I know that Tommy Sweeney's hands, his effort blocking his special teams ability, that's going to be the biggest thing. Is the same idea that we debated David Sills and Duke Williams. I think Sills is a better receiver. I think Duke Williams will be a better special teams player. That's what might happen to Jason Kroom, is that Tommy Sweeney might be a better special teams player than Kroom, and that might be how you make the roster as tight end 4, even if one is a better receiver.
Yeah, and I think that we'll talk about it all throughout the offseason here, but I think really ultimately there's probably better positions that I'd rather keep that extra guy at, and then try to, like you said, with Tyree Jackson, sneak him into the practice squad. And then if, God forbid, something happens to Croft, obviously he's had an injury history, then you bring him in. I have this feeling, and it's a gut feeling. It's not based on anything quantifiable, but I have a feeling with Knox, and I agreed not to expect anything out of him, but I have this kind of gut feeling that he starts to come along like Matt Milano did in his first year. And late in the season, that athleticism is just going to be really hard to not try to get on the field.
I think you're onto something. I think you're onto something with that, in that Daboll's smart and can use him in a couple packages where you can put his athleticism out one-on-one. Yeah, where you're not asking him to run option routes and nuanced blocking reads and pass blocking, but hey, we can get you out there as a second tight end, split you out wide, run motion the other way, get you one-on-one with an inside linebacker, and hey, go beat him down the field.
Yeah.
He can do that.
I think that all season long, them seeing, because he's going to stand out from these other tight ends. Tyler Kroft is a very nice, well-rounded guy. And I think that he fills that need. He's conservative, you know what I mean, as a tight end one to come in right now and fill a hole. He's a very conservative option if he can stay healthy. But he's not going to blow you away when he gets the ball and runs down the seam. That's not his role. Obviously, Lee Smith, very far from that role, right? So when you line up the tight ends and you're running through all summer long and at practice, Dawson Knox is going to stand out like a sore thumb athletically. And I think that's going to be hard for the coaching staff to continue to see that athleticism and then maybe see some of the lack of athleticism from the other guys all season and not try to find a way. We got to get this guy in. We got to find a package for him. We got to find something for him to try to get him a touch or two and see what he can do with the ball. And I think it'll start to come along later in the season, whether for good or bad. Either the team's struggling and they're trying to find something to get going, or, they're doing really well and they want to just keep other teams on their toes and create a package that a defensive coordinator has to plan for. So that's my gut feeling. And now the receipts are out there, so you can come at me in week 12 when he hasn't taken a snap. Come back
real quick on Dawson Knox while we're there. I know some fans have brought up just kind of an oddity. He's the last remaining unsigned draft pick. The new structure in the collective bargaining agreement, everything is pretty laid out. Every top pick in the first or second round is almost exactly laid out. You saw the Bosa holdout last year over the offset money, which is silly because that only matters if you cut a first round pick in the first 4 years, which is weird and odd. So there's a weird little loophole where the first and second round, all of their guaranteed money is pre-negotiated. Fourth through seventh rounders get very little guaranteed money at all, if any. But third rounders usually get around 25%. And it's not set in stone. It's not part of the collective bargaining agreement. So third round picks are oddly the last guys who actually can negotiate a little bit. And I absolutely expect that to be a give back by the Players Association in the next CBA, that they'll simply structure that. They're also going to agree to that offset language thing. And I believe that after the new CBA, rookie contracts will all simply be completely agreed to like the day after the draft because they'll be completely slotted. But in the interim, the third round picks actually have a little bit of wiggle room, whether teams try to haggle for 15% or 35%, or players want 35%. Most teams have been going at 25% guarantee. The Bills are not holding out for zero guarantee. Dawson Knox is not asking for 100%, but it's right of his agent to try to get him as much as he can. And if he can get 35% instead of 25%, good for him. It doesn't really matter. I don't think there's any real risk of him holding out, but just for fans to know, that's the reason that 7 of the 8 draft picks have signed and he's the only one who hasn't. So that's what's out there. It's still kind of a loophole. We can still see it next year. I expect that to be fixed in the 2021 season forward with the new CBA.
Perfect. I am glad that we have you, because that is all stuff. Even as you were talking a little bit, I
just glaze over.
Yeah, I didn't totally understand what you're talking about, but when somebody else brings it up, I'll just ask you exactly what's going on again. So that's why we have Greg here, man, for all those nuanced.
I know all the nerdy stuff.
You do. Yeah, different types of nerds. There's a lot of different sports nerds, and if you come to the premium Slack channel, you will see a little bit of all of us and all of our nerdy quirks. Real quick here, we're going to go off of Bills talk, stay in the division a little bit before we wrap up our final topic. I think it's a good time to sit back, relax, and laugh about the New York Jets a little bit.
It brought me so much joy today.
Yeah, the New York Jets fire Mike McCagnon. What are we now? A month out of the draft.
Not even 3 weeks.
3 weeks out of the draft, fire McCagnon. We've been here before, and I struggle with this, and I enjoy when other teams suffer, especially AFC East teams. I would prefer it if it was the Patriots.
Their day will come.
Their day will come, and it will be sweet suffering. But at the same time, the two little devils that sit on my, the angel. Well, no, mine are both devils. The two little devils that sit on my shoulders.
The darker angel and the slightly other.
And they battle though, because I've been here and I've had to defend my team to other people. I right now, a lot of times I reflect back on the season. Everybody said we were tanking, and I'm arguing with my own fan base and I'm arguing with other people's fan base. Nobody understands the moves they're making. Nobody understands the cuts they're doing, the dead cap they're taking on. And I'm sitting there defending it. And national media is making us the butt of all jokes. The fan base is mad, hates everything. Twitter is just ripping into your team. So I do try to have that sense to me when I'm making fun of other teams, but damn it, it feels good to laugh at the Jets too. Do you have this conflict when it comes to sports of like, hey, I've been there and it's not always what it appears to be, but I'm going to laugh at you anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that here, but I'm very petty, so I have no problem taking joy in them struggling. I know some fans did throw that out there that, oh, it's the same thing that happened with the Bills. It's not. Doug Whaley's contract was up. Sean McDermott was obviously making all the calls. They knew they were all going to be done the day after the draft because they were simply holding them because of the work they did scouting for the draft. Eric and I have joked about it before that, it just magically happens that a bunch of the guys that Brandon Beane liked got picked by the Bills and then he got hired a week later. That's so fortunate and lucky that happened. This is much different. McCagnon and the player personnel VP both had 2 years left on their deal. They negotiated $191 million in contracts to Le'Veon Bell, Mosley, Henry Anderson, and Jamison Crowder. So, Doug Whaley signed no free agents in that offseason. So all those kind of moves, there's a fair amount of difference of somebody riding out the string and then cutting off and bringing in the new guy versus McCagnon hired Adam Gase 2 months ago. And then all of a sudden Gase has enough juice within that organization to now get him fired. And then even to kind of compound that, you also had rumors come out today that Adam Gase was adamantly against the Le'Veon Bell signing and that he didn't want to have money invested in any running back, which in a vacuum, that speaks to my heart. I don't want to spend money on running backs either. That makes me think maybe he's not as crazy as I think he is. But you're telling me that he has enough pull and enough juice in that organization to get McCagnon fired, but he didn't have enough pull and enough juice to squash a signing that he was adamantly against. That just, if both those things are true, that's hysterical. And that is all-time level dumpster fire kind of stuff. Or maybe there were some things leaked in the press today to try to make Gase look a little bit better and a little bit smarter, but it doesn't matter. I actually was going back and forth with Casey Joyner from ESPN in that, like, okay, that's great. Give Gase credit for it. The $40 million in contract for Le'Veon Bell didn't go anywhere. He's still there. So if he didn't want him, you just made training camp super awkward. So that's fun.
Yeah, no, and there's something to when that stuff comes out of kind of weeding through the mud a little bit of agents putting particular things out there. You don't know what side is maybe putting some things out there of who was right, who was wrong, what things were said, because we know that the people that are locked into the Jets were saying, and as much as we hate some of the Jets reporters, there's people that have relationships with these guys just like the Bills reporters do, and they were saying there's no way that this firing's happening. The relationship isn't as bad as it's being reported, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, actually it is, and it's very bad, and we're going to fire McCagnon. So I think that the team now is let this get out of control. The fire spread. Now agents are putting things out there, but I agree. I don't think it's good that you're on record. Le'Veon Bell's on Twitter. We've seen him on Twitter before. He's looking up his own name.
Yeah.
So him seeing that the coach didn't want him on the team, that's not great. Probably not a great start to things. But at the end of the day, these guys are professionals. They're going to have to go out and play football. All the crap stuff aside, the culture's not great there probably right now. But if you do start to win, that could probably change. I think the national media was a little too high on the Jets anyway, and I'm hoping that this brings them back down a peg to realize what the fans were seeing of the dysfunction and no real path to success outside of having Sam Darnold. I think that's what everybody pointed to is, hey, they drafted the Sam Darnold kid. He looks like he's going to be good. I totally agree with that. Outside of that, there is zero plan that I see of building around this kid, where in Buffalo, I think we have maybe a little bit the opposite is we're hoping that maybe Josh Allen is good. And we've seen maybe that he could be, but there's still a lot of development. But the outside of him, we have seen an incredibly concerted effort to build the team around him and put him in the best position possible. So I think that is a much better path to success, even if Josh Allen's not even ever that good. Is we know that there's a clear plan, and that's what the Jets don't have. And I think that's the funniest part about this whole thing is the national media have said the Jets are really the ones going to come out and compete with the New England Patriots. They're going to be the second best team in the AFC East. And you're kind of seeing that the Jets don't even feel that way, because if you really feel like you're competing with the Patriots, you don't fire your GM.
Yeah. If you think that your leader had such a good offseason that you let him make enormous signings and make the 3rd overall pick in the draft and then fire him, what does that say about the investments you just let him make and the signings you did? And I think you and I have tried to be reasonable in that the players individually in a vacuum that the Jets signed are talented players. Would I want Le'Veon Bell or CJ Mosley or Jamison Crowder? Sure, they're good players. I would take them. Now, the Jets paid a running back, a 3-4 inside linebacker, and a slot receiver top of market deals, and some the most ever that position's ever been paid. And that's maybe a little odd and could come back to bite them down the line. I could see that coming back. But in general, they added talented players. The same idea. They had a great player fall into their lap at pick 3. They got Quinnen Williams. That's phenomenal. I think that we see Sam Darnold as a net positive and a chance to be a good quarterback down the line. But they didn't add much of anything to their offensive line. They traded for Asemele from the Raiders, who was good, but is older and coming off a really ugly
season. They tried to address center. We don't know what happened.
Yeah, it was odd that, they sounded like they had Paradis in the building and then let him walk, or didn't match what ended up being a pretty reasonable offer that Carolina got him for. So it's interesting where they spent their money. It's interesting that Darnold's going to have to learn a new offense now, that they didn't get him a lot of help up front in front of him. They did get him some weapons, a slot receiver, a running back who's the
one
best.
They don't even want.
Yeah, there was the best receiving running back in the NFL that the coach doesn't even want. So there's some good things going on there, but it's certainly not the way I would approach things. It's not the way I'm glad it's not the way Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have approached things. I love that we have continuity and some of the same guys in Josh Allen's ear, and the same head coach, the same GM, the same offensive coordinator, same defensive coordinator, brought in 14 offensive free agents to try to grow and build and add talent around him with depth in case we have some injuries. That seems like at least a plan. Now, we won't know if it works or not, but there's at least a plan there that you went and aggressively approached those things. And I know there was another tweet out there today that cracked me up. The 2018 starting receivers for the Buffalo Bills opening day were Kelvin Benjamin, Andre Holmes, and Jeremy Curley. None of them were even signed by NFL teams today, this far into the offseason. So the fact that we've now retooled that entire receiving core plus 2 tight ends or 3 tight ends plus 7 new offensive linemen between the 6 free agents and the draft pick, I think that's the kind of plan you want to see. So I'd love to pretend that that's a death sentence for the Jets and it means they're going to be complete trash. But we got to be realistic. There's a reason Vegas pegged them to have more wins than the Bills. There's a reason that most projection systems projected them to be better than the Bills. I didn't agree with that. I love when the Bills get crapped on, and it gives McDermott more ammo to put chips on players' shoulders and to remind them that no one thinks they're any good. But the Jets probably aren't as big of a dumpster fire as we want to be, but today wasn't a good day under any circumstance.
Yeah, and this time of year, it's fun to have something to laugh about. So one thing here, before we jump to this next topic, and I just thought of this while you were talking, a thing that I got laughed off the internet when Sean McDermott got hired, after Brandon Beane got hired, I went out on the internet and said, I believe that they should get 4 years minimum, and I would like it if they got the full 5, because they were both on for these 5-year contracts. And I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, you guys. I want them here for the full 5 years. And the reason I said that at the time was I went back and I built a timeline of Bills head coaches, GMs, and coordinators. And it was just overlap city of just dysfunction. And it's really shocking to me that here in the NFL still, with how much money gets invested and the lack of success of some organizations, that there isn't more of a approach in this manner where you bring in a GM and a head coach together at the same time that are on the same page and ready to move forward, because you have so many wasted seasons if you have this overlap and GM's not drafting for the right coach, and then you get rid of the coach and then you have to revamp your roster. And that's what happened to the Bills for years and years and years, switching defensive coordinators. Now we got to bring in all new pieces for these other coordinators. And it really just kicks the can down the road and doesn't allow you to have success. The teams that have success have the same people in place. And yeah, their people go on and they just bring another guy up into place, but they're not totally dismantling the front office or the coaching staff or whatever it is. I think the Bills are on the path now. Obviously, the Jets have hit a roadblock. You have the Patriots, who obviously they have Tom Brady. So yeah, it's easier when you have Tom Brady. I get it. But they've had the same coach and GM for whatever, 20 odd years now. So I just don't understand. And maybe you have more business sense than I do. Why are these multi-billion-dollar businesses not able to understand that the path to success is continuity and having your most important positions all moving in the same direction and on the same page?
So I think there's multiple elements that go into it that make it really tough. And a big piece of that is the shiny new thing syndrome, and that there are way more failures that happen. But every once in a while, when you see a Sean McVay and you see that kind of turnaround, frustrated coaches go down that path to say, well, why can't I have that? I want to have nice, fancy things. I want things to be turned around and to go from 3-13 to 13-3 immediately. And some guys that are overly demanding and unrealistic are going to just constantly want to do that. So I think that the 5-year plan you talked about is a great point, in that what we were dealing with and how much we had to gut and redo was going to take time. Now, a couple factors have come into play there that are going to give them the luxury for, I think, that to legitimately happen. Is one, they ended the drought in the first year and that they made the playoffs right off the bat. That garnered an enormous amount of goodwill. Then Brandon Beane warned them, and we took all of our medicine last year, and we set records for dead cap spend and didn't even allow anything to happen and signed no impactful free agents and went through the whole thing. Then Brandon Beane saw the development, and the Pagula saw the development of Josh Allen during the year. So that comes into this year. Brandon Beane showed, hey, I wasn't messing around. Once I gutted this and emptied out the cupboards, I was going to restock it with NFL caliber talent. Here, look, I've signed 20 free agents and a killer 8-person draft class. I think that they've garnered so much good favor. I genuinely don't think there's anything on the football field that could cost them their jobs in 2019 not to be here for 2020. Now, there's always crazy off the field madness that you can't guarantee anything, but I don't think there's any scenario, because with what Sean McDermott has shown the past 2 years of what he's gotten out of the talent on the roster, if everyone's healthy, this is going to be a pretty decent team. And maybe the balls don't bounce their way and they only end up 7-9. It's a little frustrating, but there is no scenario where this roster that they built without nasty injuries is going to go 3-13. And if they go 3-13, it's because there was a horrible rash of injuries and there's an excuse or a reason. So I don't see anything on the field that could possibly cost them their jobs. Getting into the 5th year in 2021, that takes a little bit more, but I don't think there's any scenario that they don't see 4 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've said it, you've heard me on the show. I think halfway through 2020 is when we're really going to be able to sit back and judge Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, and Josh Allen. I think you have a full slate of games there. We're going to really be able to know who Josh Allen is at that point. They're all kind of tied together. So if 2020 starts off bad, I think that hot seat starts to ramp up, and maybe they all don't make it through the year, or that's the first thing they do at the end of the year is say, you know what, guys, clearly this isn't working out. We're moving in another direction. But I think as long as we see steady improvement this year, and it doesn't have to be in the record, just steady improvement in the players and in the building. And then 2020, I do think the record really has to start to show that this is a competitive playoff caliber football team that is going to compete for the division. If they don't show that by then, I don't think they get the full 5. But I don't think that, I think this whole mantra of when you get hired, you have 3 years to turn it around and then you're out of there. I think the NFL needs to change that. Yes, that works for the Sean McVays. I think those are more anomalies than they are what should be the standard. I think that they should be giving coaches and teams more times, and I'll die on the hill that Chan Gailey should have got another year. I think that a lot of the times it's very reactionary, and people don't have the long game and the mental capacity for the long game that Brandon Beane has displayed to the Bagulas. And I'm glad that they bought into what he is preaching, because I do think this is the way to successfully build it for the future. I think, yeah, the Rams are having a lot of great success right now. They had great success last year. They're probably going to have really good success this year. I don't know how long-term sustainable the Rams.
There's a lot of checks coming due in LA. There's a lot of checks coming due.
I don't think they have the quarterback to weather the storm of those checks coming due. I don't think they have a lot of the pieces to weather those. And I think that shine that's on Sean McVay is going to wear off real quick when those checks come due. So I would rather do it the long way and deal with the pain up front to have sustained success. And I think that's where the Pagulas were sold by Brandon Beane, that he wasn't selling them some snake oil.
No, that's a great point. Great point.
Let's get into all these new toys and talents and pieces that we got. We've said this over and over again. The Buffalo Bills went from a couple of different position groups. We talked about those 20 free agents they brought in. A couple of different position groups. They went from probably bottom 3 in the league. I think a lot of us can say bottom at certain ones, to average. And that is something to celebrate. A lot of fan bases wouldn't celebrate having a mediocre wide receiver room. I'm going to pop champagne.
This is awesome. Yeah. I haven't seen mediocre in a decade.
Yeah. I'm going to definitely pop some champagne for having mediocre wide receiver room. And I think that is going to be a huge benefit to Josh Allen. We put out a graphic yesterday, maybe over on the Cover One Twitter page, Facebook, follow us on all those. I'm going to share it here right now. And let me know, Greg, when everybody can see it's that in your end. Perfect. So this is a graphic that we put up. It was actually Greg's idea because we don't really know how this is going to play out, right? They added John Brown. They added Cole Beasley, guys that we're excited about. Robert Foster's in a big year here, having been brought back. He really developed pretty well at the end of the year. Zay Jones is also in a really big year, big chip on his shoulder to prove that he was worth at least getting close to the pick that he was picked at. So we put it out there to connect the letter and associate it with the category, right? So whoever you think is going to have the most receptions, comment A1 or B1 or whatever it was. Yep. We got some great stuff. It really led to a good discussion. I don't even know. I probably saw maybe 3 or 4 of the same one. There's a lot of different takes out there of who's going to lead.
I was really surprised by the variety.
Yeah, a lot of variety. So I'm hoping the chat gets involved in this and we can see some of the ones out there. Greg, what were your thoughts on this, and give us kind of the why?
So the initial take that I had was based on the conversation of, the Bills don't have a wide receiver 1. What are we going to do? And I had gone down that path, and I'm like, well, like, I get they don't have one dominant player that's going to lead them in everything, but I think they might have 4 guys who might lead them in the 4 most important receiving categories. So it kind of created this idea to put a graphic together to say, hey, how do you think this is going to work? What do you think it's going to look like? So my initial premise was that Cole Beasley would have the most catches. Zay Jones would play the most snaps because of he can play the slot and the outside and his blocking ability, and he played the most snaps last year. That John Brown would get the most receiving yards as the most consistent downfield threat and a lot of those 15 to 20 yard catches over and over again. And that Robert Foster might have the most receiving touchdowns with the big games, but then might also have some 2 catches for 21-yard duds in between. Now, what I saw was a really wide variety of responses. You had some, real Zay Jones stands that were saying Zay might lead the team in receptions, yards, and and snaps. I think I probably saw the most. I think John Brown might be the most underrated. I think people see him as a notch behind Robert Foster because of the connection and the chemistry with Josh Allen. And I would just temper fans to say, I don't think the Bills gave John Brown 3 years and $27 million to be wide receiver 4. Maybe they did, but I don't anticipate that. So it was interesting. I was really surprised by the variety. I was surprised by how big of a variation there was in some fans thinking 1 or 2 guys could lead them in multiple categories. And then some also picked out and they thought it was going to be one of each, just different combinations of what we projected. So it was some really interesting feedback.
Yeah, and I stand out for Cole Beasley a little bit. That was a joke. Just if people don't follow me on the internet, I was obviously joking. Mostly, I am high on Cole Beasley though, but a lot of things are going to have to come into factor for Cole Beasley to have the type of success that I think he's going to have, and a lot of it's going to be on Josh Allen's development and his ability to operate in that short to intermediate area, which we don't know that he could do that with a consistent basis. But I think when I look at all these guys, yes, I think both Foster and Brown have the ability to separate in a different way than Cole Beasley does. I think that they have the ability to really separate in the long ball game. I do think Foster might have a little bit more already at this point in his career ability to separate with route running, which is kind of crazy to think. But I think Cole Beasley is going to be open most of the time. And if Josh Allen can find that and work with that and work on that short and intermediate game, I think absolutely, I think Cole Beasley is going to have the ability to lead in receptions. And I think that he's more of a red zone threat in a really non-traditional way than people are giving him credit for. So I think Cole Beasley can definitely lead in categories 1 receptions and category 3 receiving touchdowns. I don't think that's implausible.
Sure.
I do think I'm down on Foster, or I'm down on Brown a little bit too. And I don't think that it means that he's wide receiver 4. I think he has a huge role in this offense. And even if that's as a person that's drawing defense away from these other guys, that's a huge role. I think he's going to get a fair amount of receptions. I think he'll have a fair amount of big plays. I just don't know that he'll lead in any particular category. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I made that point with Zay as well, is that I could actually see Zay not leading them in any of the statistical categories, other than I actually think he will play the most snaps because of his blocking and the fact that he can play inside and outside. But I think he might be second in all 3 of them. I think he might have the second most catches to Cole Beasley, the second most yards to John Brown, the second most touchdowns to Robert Foster, and not lead them in anything, but be consistently involved in all of it. So I could see the same thing that, if either John Brown or Robert Foster really runs away with that single role, it could suppress the other one back a little bit. I think it's more likely that Robert Foster will take more of the specialized deep threat role only when we're going with multiple wide receivers and a 3 or 4 wide receiver set. And I actually think his snap count will come back a little bit. I do think his chemistry with Josh Allen will matter, and that he will have an impactful amount of plays efficiency wise when he's on the field. But I actually think he could take the biggest step back in playing time. I think Cole Beasley is going to be Josh Allen's safety blanket and best friend. And then I think Zay Jones and John Brown are the primary outside receivers on most plays. And that nowadays in the NFL, you have three receivers on the field most plays anyways. So I expect that to be the case in how they set it up. But there is a possibility that if Robert Foster's chemistry and his size and speed combination just are undeniable, and he takes another step forward from the glimpses and flashes of promise he had last year, then yeah, there's a possibility John Brown is just an awesome luxury as a field stretcher, taking the top off the defense and keeping guys honest, and just a handful of big games here or there.
Yeah, and I think that the chemistry point is a good point. You definitely want to see your quarterback have chemistry with particular guys, but let's not also be mistaken that he can still add chemistry with guys that they got, but as the season ramps up throughout training camp and throughout this season. So just because he had chemistry with Robert Foster doesn't mean that somebody else can't capture that same alchemy of production throughout training camp this summer and build their own chemistry. So yes, today on paper, he had production with Robert Foster, and we can't deny that, but that doesn't preclude these other guys from the ability to also build that chemistry, because I think we all do think that he'll be able to build some type of chemistry with Cole Beasley, with his ability to get open and be somebody that Josh Allen sees open. We know that Josh Allen needs to see guys open to hit him. He's not going to hit guys with anticipation. Cole Beasley is going to be that guy for him. Zay Jones might not ever be that guy where he's really creating a lot of separation and just flashing open all the time where Josh Allen can see him. So maybe he doesn't ever develop that type of chemistry with him, but he does a lot of the other intangibles. So I guess my point is chemistry is something that we could take into consideration, but where you've added pieces, you don't know the possibilities of where that chemistry is going to go. And that could negatively affect Robert Foster if he builds big time chemistry with John Brown this preseason and gets a lot of confidence in him. Because I'll tell you what, the chemistry was built with Robert Foster, but it wasn't built in the summer. In the summer, I was frustrated with Robert Foster not chasing down balls, letting balls get away from him, big plays in preseason. And I thought it negatively impacted Josh Allen's ability to get on the field right away. That chemistry didn't come until later in the year, practices and all that stuff. So yes, chemistry matters, but I think it can be developed across the board.
Yeah, so a lot of that's going to come here in the offseason workouts, things that are out there in the chat. I know a lot of the guys were asking about, is Cole Beasley a Julian Edelman? And honestly, I don't know that he's a terrible amount less talented. Edelman's thicker than Beasley is. He's a bigger guy. But no matter what, there's nothing Cole Beasley and Josh Allen are going to be able to do to replicate 10 years of chemistry and knowledge that Edelman and Brady have. And Brady's style as that anticipatory, amazing mind to read defenses, with Edelman's ability to do the same and then know where the other one's going to go.
It's unfair.
There's just nothing that's ever going to, literally 10 years from now, if Beasley was still here with Allen, that's when that could come up. So I think Beasley can be really good, can be Josh's safety blanket. His footwork is one of the best in the NFL at getting himself open. He can do all those things and still not be Edelman just because their situation is so unfair. The other comment in here, I think we've seen a lot of places, and I've had the same response. Topper was talking about Zay Jones and what did he do besides a couple big Miami games. I think fans had really high expectations for Zay and don't realize, he played the most snaps, had the most targets, the most catches, the most yards, and the most touchdowns on the team.
And his drop rate is substantially from his rookie year change.
Yeah, and improve that. So don't get me wrong. Do we need to see more? Absolutely. Do we need him to take another step forward? Yes. But some of the people asking, is he going to get cut, or, what else is going on? He's a second-round pick in his third year on a really cheap contract that is still virtually all guaranteed. So we save almost no money against the cap. There is no possibility Zay Jones is going to get cut. Now, all the things that we said about chemistry and things like that, if he doesn't take another step forward, there is a scenario where the outside is Robert Foster and the other outside is John Brown, and the slot is Cole Beasley, and Zay is the backup to all of them, and he loses snaps. That is one of the scenarios that could happen here, and he could get suppressed down to that wide receiver 4 role. But that would be the worst case scenario. There's no chance he gets cut. I guess there's a chance he gets traded. But there's no chance he gets released. And then looking into next year, we would look into what that means for the final year of his contract and things like that. But I expect a decent step forward from him to be able to have a clean off season and to now have some competition brought in that he shouldn't feel good about any scenario being a top wideout.
Zay is a guy that going back to last year, fans' frustration. I didn't love the frustration after 1 year of lack of production. Yes, he had the drops. He came back and he proved that he can fix that. And a lot of guys don't have that mental capability, especially with everything that he dealt with in the offseason. He came back and just went to work, and he did a good job considering we were one of the worst offenses in all of football. So he has proven that. But I've compared him a lot to Nelson Aguilar, who I think is a guy that Bills fans would love to be able to get their hands on Nelson Aguilar. But if you look at them, and I hate doing this comparing statistics, if you look at Nelson Aguilar's first 2 years and you look at Zay Jones' first 2 years, Zay Jones has actually been more productive overall than Nelson Aguilar. And so some of these guys, I do think maybe Zay Jones was overdrafted. I don't know. We don't know yet, but I don't think that we should demand that he live up to that pick. And he doesn't have to live up to that pick to still be a productive player who is a good addition to this team. So yes, would I like him to live up to a second round pick? Absolutely. Does he have to last year? No. Do I want to see him get closer this year? Yes. But even this year, he doesn't have to necessarily blow the doors off the building and do anything crazy. I think as long as he's a consistent receiver, kind of a poor man's Robert Woods, that's totally fine by me. A guy that can come in, block, he's going to know what he's supposed to be doing, and just a consistent pro, that's good enough. for me, especially with the additions that they made to the room. I don't need much more from Zay than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the NFL for decades had that rule of the third year breakout receiver. I mean, that for 25 years, that was the expectation, is that, oh, if you draft a receiver, don't expect much in the first or second year. Now, recently, we've seen some guys come out with amazing rookie years that jumped right into things, but that hasn't dramatically changed. Like Nelson Aguilar is a perfect example. He was a flat out bust for 2 years. I mean, they would have given him away for a song, and now he's a pretty good receiver who really contributed to their Super Bowl run. So getting now to the point where, again, maybe Zay doesn't pan out, but there's no benefit for us cutting loose, selling at an absolute low point. We wouldn't get any return in a trade. There's no financial benefit to cutting him, and we don't have so much depth at wide receiver that I think we can give him away. He is our best blocking wide receiver on run plays. So I think there's value in still having him on the team, and you still have the upside that he was an early second round pick and a top 40 overall pick that I think it can still be worthwhile to see what he has in front of him.
Absolutely. So I think that wraps it up for us. We've gone through quite a bit of topics for it being a pretty slow news week, Bills related wise. Real quick, we will not be here next week. We're not going to be doing the show, barring any crazy news. If there's something super crazy happens, I'll get on here at some point. It'd probably be a lot later in the evening. My wife's out of town, so I'm going to have the kids to myself, so I won't be able to go. And Greg is taking some personal time. We've allowed him some vacation time from Cover One. And
going to Disney World.
He is literally going to Disney World. That's not a Super Bowl joke. So we will not be here next week, but fear not, fellow Cover One fans. We will be back the following week and the rest of the off season for your listening enjoyment. So Greg, if people like you, I think you're a likable guy. I enjoy you. I follow you on all the social media networks. Where can people get in touch with you and find all your cool takes?
Yeah, come and find me. Luckily, usually half of people like me and the other half hate me, so it's great. Either one of them are worthwhile following me on Twitter, because you can reply and troll and argue with me, or you can enjoy my witty banter. So come and find me on Twitter at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. Have a really good time. Follow back a lot of Bills fans and really have fun kind of getting into things and really enjoy that. Again, come and find us, cover1.net, and join as a premium member. Jump into the premium level Slack. I think we've got a deal out there right now for $20 for a whole year. I can't tell you how many things I waste $20 on. So, please come and jump aboard, have fun with us. It's really worthwhile. As Aaron touched on, when we get back, I'm excited that I think we're going to start to go through some of the detailed breakdowns, position by position, with really where we stand. Some of those discussions we talked about that are actually going to be really hotly debated this year, that we have some really good players that won't make this team. We're going to start breaking that down position by position at, who's really going to make it. And my personal favorite, Puntapalooza 2019, Corey versus Corey.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. You can find me at Aaron Quinn 716. I like to do a lot of graphics in my fun time.
Some amazing work. You are an incredibly talented man.
I will PayPal you for that later. But no, I like to do that. So you'll see a lot of that on my Twitter, plus engaging with fans every opportunity that I get. I probably spend way too much time. I know my wife hates how much time I'm on Twitter up late arguing with people. So come find me there at Aaron Quinn 716. While you're over here, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And when you're there, hit the little notification bell. That'll let you know anytime we go live. Like I said, if there's some big news that happens next week, even though we're taking the week off, I'm still going to pop on and go live at some point. So it'll notify you if we do that. And that's really key. Make sure you have that set up and that you're getting notifications. If you were just a listener on the podcasts, we appreciate that too. You should come over and check it out on YouTube sometime, because the chat's pretty cool. You can get involved and it's always ripping over there. So if you haven't checked it out on YouTube, please do it. But if you listen on the podcast, we appreciate that. And while you're in your podcast app, if you don't mind leaving a little review for us, that goes a really long way to helping us continue to keep this going. So like we said, guys, make sure you're following Cover One on all your platforms. We're doing all kinds of cool things here coming up this year. We got our boy Rob Quinn back. He's putting out a lot of good content. Fernando's always putting out the same content you can expect from him. And while we were here, I know Eric is working on content behind the scenes right now. So he tagged me in something while we were on the show. So make sure you go check him out. And thanks for coming out on the show, guys. We really can't do this without you. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch you not next week, but the following week. Thanks, guys.